If you enjoy truthful and heartfelt conversations to inspire you to become a better version of yourself, empowering stories will help you. Hello, Abe. Good morning. Thank you very much for being here. It's our pleasure. And for our community, Abraham Heisler is a performance coach. And what he does is to help entrepreneurs to run their business without the burnout in less time and without the burnout. The burnout is what blows my mind. So, Abe, please let us know how you do it.
Yeah, well, it's pretty simple if you think about it from the standpoint of the reason why people burn out is because they're forcing things that are not meant to be forced. And so my job is to help people to know the difference between force and power. So force, I like to use the metaphor of surfing. Force, there's a certain amount of energy that needs to be exerted to do anything in life, right? If you're surfing, you're paddling to catch the wave. But once you catch the wave, you're working with the elements, you're working with something way more powerful than your limited ability for, of your arms to produce the energy that it produces. And so that's the work that I do with entrepreneurs is I help them to find those little levers inside their mindset, inside their life, their routines, their habits, their leadership, the way they're thinking in order to really tap into something much more powerful so they can achieve incredible results in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you something. When I moved to Ireland, the first book that I put in my suitcase was Power versus Force. First one. So I so understand that. And what's the lever? Is it the why? Is it, I don't know, something spiritual? What is the why that people tell you?
See, here's the thing. It's different for everybody. And every individual case is slightly unique. So I can't just give a blanket answer.
Yeah.
But what I can say is this: if you want to pull back and get a little philosophical, because people, and sort of give some inspiration and some motivation to your audience, what I can say is this: is that all of us, each and one of us, has this what I would call a purpose inside of ourselves, right? And yeah, when you talk about the why, that intrinsic reason why I do anything. There's extrinsic, which is the external motivating factor. So I help people make a lot of money, for instance, right? And that's why they see me on social media and they're like, okay, I'll work with that guy. It's because I can help them make money. But internally, intrinsic, what's really important is, what it is that they want to do with that money. They want to provide for their family. They want to get their parents out of debt. They want to, in my case, I'm part of an organization that supports projects all around the world. And I just want to be able to support those projects, right? So the extrinsic, intrinsic is very different. And that purpose, that desire to create impact it's a seed that grows into an oak tree. And what I mean by that, so for instance, let's back up for a second. There is something called a law of polarity. This is a universal law that just basically means that there is no halves in this universe, right? There's only wholes. And so that's why everything has an opposite. Where there's day, there's night. Where there's, light, there's dark. Everything has this opposite, right? And so what's really interesting is that if you look at our desire to create impact or to do something great, that intrinsic factor, that why, that meaning, as Viktor Frankl would talk about in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, that is only half of the equation. It's only part of it, right? The other part is the fulfillment of that desire. In the East, they call this dharma, right? It's our nature. It's like this evolution. And so on a very sort of philosophical level, what I'm doing is I'm helping people to remove the sort of hindrances that they have in their own ability to evolve and really change their thinking in such a way that they're able to get out of their own way, to help people to get out of their own way, and to remove all the sort of programming and belief systems, all the limitation that's preventing people from really truly achieving the fulfillment of their potential. And really what that is that's the fulfillment of that desire to create impact and legacy.
In layman's terms, the way I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Abe, is that we have this calling inside. And the calling could be against what my father wanted me to do. Like he's being a lawyer and forever, and his father and the other one. So that there's a family pressure for me to become a lawyer. But I am a guitar player and that's my calling. But still, I do law and there's no fulfillment there because
Mm,
that's not my calling, that's his calling. So my why there is I want to please my dad.
mm,
But the dharma is not there. What happens at the end? What happens
yeah.
if I continue being a lawyer forever?
Well, what happens when you ignore that call is you start to experience breakdown in your life and in your body. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where illness ensues, right? And if you look at, Joseph Campbell's work, he talks about the hero's journey, which is basically, if you boil it down, there's three parts to the hero's journey. And the hero's journey is something that's referenced in all Hollywood movies. I mean, script
Yeah.
writers study the hero's journey. Star Wars was built on the hero's journey. So if you break it down to three parts, it's the separation is the first part, separation from the mundane world or from the comfort zone. So that means leaving the family, leaving the thought system, leaving the tribe, leaving, this identity that we have of ourselves that's sort of handed down to us that we're inheriting,
Mm.
and going out onto that vision quest and finding our own internal dharma. Like, what is our own internal purpose, right? And so that separation is the hardest part. Most people don't actually do that. They always try to just, go with the flow in the sense of, my parents are saying this, society is saying this, I don't want to step outside. Because if you think about it like this, if you go back thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, we were biologically programmed to keep with the pack, right? Because if we go out on our own, like, we're dead meat, right? There's like saber-toothed tigers and all sorts of stuff, right? So we had to stay together. And so what that translates to in our modern day in 2021 is there's this fear of going against the norm, going against society, potentially being ridiculed and even cast away, cast aside, which is why public speaking is like the biggest fear that most people have, even more than death, right? Because this sort of sense of getting ridiculed really strikes something primal within us.
Yeah.
So it's very challenging. Like your predicament, what you just said about, I have this desire to be a guitar player. My father wants me to be a lawyer, and it's like going against that is one of the most difficult, most challenging things
Mm.
there are for people to do. So yes, I agree 100%.
So that would be the first step. What about the other two?
So the next one is initiation, which
Mm.
is the dark night of the soul, which is when you have to go into your darkness and embrace your shadow. And what's really interesting about that is, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and there's this concept that, like, I need to kill myself and sacrifice everything in order to achieve success, right? And really, what most people are trying to do is they're trying to be successful and achieve what they want to achieve, but while staying comfortable, meaning avoiding the darkness, avoiding, the shadow.
Yeah.
And the first thing, like, this actually comes from one of my mentors, but the first thing that I ask somebody when they're stuck, right? Because they know this is where I want to go, but I can't get there. The first thing I ask is, what are you resisting? Is it picking up and making cold calls to people? Is it doing a live stream and getting out on social media and speaking your truth? Is it being vulnerable and saying to people, like, telling people your real story rather than just like hiding behind the superficial, mask? That darkness, that truth, like, what is the real truth? That's the crucible, right? That's the fire. There's another great quote that the degree to which a person can grow, and I would even say the degree to which their business can grow, is directly proportional to the amount of truth you can take about yourself without running away.
Wow. Powerful.
Yeah, very powerful. And so I like to say that it's impossible to be successful and to stay hidden. You have to expose yourself. You have to face something that's really challenging within yourself, whether it's a relationship that's not working out, a partnership that's not working out, whether it's just putting yourself out there and making offers. My business, I built, a six-figure coaching business with very little marketing. I mean, I just picked up the phone and just started having conversations with people. And that was very difficult for me to do because I was always very much sales avoidant. you come at me with your multi-level marketing thing and you want me to buy whatever, I'm like running in the opposite direction. I was not into selling, I was not into money, but I was also under earning. And I wasn't achieving the success that I want to achieve in my life, right? And so I had to just get on my phone and just start going through my phone and just calling everybody and saying, hey, this is what I'm doing now. What's up? Like, how's things, how's your life going? Like, what are you working on? What are some of your challenges? And it was super confronting for me, but that really challenged me to get out of my comfort zone. And in that, I was able to achieve a certain level of success rather than most people. They just want to like throw up some cute videos on Instagram, on Facebook, but they're not really putting themselves out there in a real way. And that's why a lot of people remain stuck, certainly in my industry, but that's across the boards in any industry.
Eventually, it's about a real relationship between two people.
That's right.
I suppose if we can reframe, rephrase, and talk to ourselves in a different way, we can reach that potential. Because if I say, oh my God, I need to call this person and sell them my program, it's like, oh, anxiety. But if you say, I have this program that can have a lot of influence and can help this person, whether they buy it or not, that's not my problem, or that's not my goal. My goal is to tell them, I have this, it might be of interest to you, and it's up to you whether you take it or not. Maybe by rephrasing that way, we would be more prone to put ourselves out there and say, this is what I have, you take it or leave it, rather than I need to push this up onto you. Does it make sense?
Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of reframes that you can do when it comes to putting yourself out there. I mean, one of my favorites is looking at it from a standpoint. This is a bit, I mean, a lot of people have a sense of some sort of higher power or relationship with the universe, right? And so if you come at it from the standpoint of I'm not the one making the calls, like the universe is making the call for me. There's a reason why this person's name has showed up in front of my eyeballs on this very day, in this very moment, right? And so it's not like me, this like hustler trying to sell things, like me versus the world. It's more if I can just get out of my own way and realize that, like for instance, the most powerful conversations and interactions, serendipity interactions that I've had have been like, oh, you called me at the right time, like, wow, this is such an important conversation. I'm so glad, like all this stuff that I could never have imagined with my own limited brain. I just need to get out of my way, follow the little impulses, and allow whatever wants to come through to come through. And when I can do that successfully, that's when things really take off for me and for the clients that I work with.
Yeah, I still love this spiritual approach. That's how I see it anyway. A approach of I am a vessel.
Right.
I think I am a vessel and I'm here for the service of a higher power. Then our ego goes, oh, I'm screwed here.
Right. Well, the technical term for that is transient hypofrontality, which is it's a psychological sort of neuroscience perspective, and it looks at the brain from the standpoint of the prefrontal cortex is where the ego exists. That's the conscious mind, because that's our reasoning, our logic. That's like we're making decisions, but that's also where we get stuck in our head. We overanalyze. We have the inner self critic, all that type of stuff. But when we enter into a flow state, the theory is that part of the brain slows down and we're tapping into a more primal, more intuitive part of our anatomy, right? Of our chemistry. And so in that flow state, that sort of mystical experience is less about us and more about the field experience, like what's happening, with a team of Navy SEALs or basketball players or the band that's playing together. They're sort of in this oneness experience, and that's really it. That's the key to life, I think, and the key to successful business as well is to recreate those flow-like experiences.
Yeah, I suppose that the education that we've been imposed was everything related to the left brain and to be so analytical, and so you have to do things certain way. But we can still use that. We can use the monkey mind, we can use the ego to punch stuff in our computers and use it. But as you say, it's about turning it around. Let's go into the field. Let's go into being the vessels, and then we can use this rational mind to produce things in a way that reach people, that we can add the value. Does that
Right.
make sense?
Yeah. So I'm actually studying neuroscience at MIT with a woman named Dr. Tara Swart, and she has proposed this, what she calls the brain agility model, which is interesting because it's based on all the different, mode networks of the brain and the different, anatomy of the brain and the different ways that we can think. And certainly logic and reasoning has dominated our Western mind because ever since the Enlightenment philosophers, it's been more about logic and reasoning and science and things like that. But throughout time and throughout different cultures, there's different ways of thinking that has been prioritized. So aside from logic and reasoning, which is only one, there's also creativity. So there's the left brain, right brain, at least that's what people call it, although that's not quite anatomically accurate.
Yeah.
But the terms apply. So there's more creative thinking. There's also what's called interoception, which is the ability to tap into what's going on in my body, the hairs that stand up on end or the butterflies in my stomach. So for instance, if I'm in a conversation with somebody and I feel something shift inside my body, I can tell that there's something going on here. This person's having an experience. And I can actually, because my limbic system mirrors what's happening in their system, and I'm able to actually mirror back what's happening and make decisions based on that, which is really fascinating. There's the emotional side. There's also the intuitive side, the gut-brain connection. And we know now that, the gut, there's a whole network of neurons that run through the stomach. And so the theory is now that we have working memory in our neocortex, but it's like a RAM on a computer. It can only hold so much information. The subconscious mind, the limbic system, the brainstem holds more information, but then the stomach can hold just your entire life's information and memories and everything. So there's certain things that we feel in our stomach that it doesn't make sense logically, but it's stored memory from millions of other instances where we've been in a very similar way, and it's recognizing a certain pattern. And by listening to that, by practicing proper gut health, taking acidophilus and all sorts of cultures in order to have, the microbiome that's necessary for gut health, we're able to actually listen to the gut and what it's telling us. And we call it intuition, but there's actually a science backing here that shows that we can actually make decisions based on what's happening in our stomach. And this is like everybody does this anyway, even though we don't officially talk about it, right? So it's very validating.
Yeah, we all do. And the intuition normally has an adjective before, which is the female intuition. In your experience in MIT or working with people, what's this difference between the female intuition? It's only women having it. Are we disconnected from it if you are born male? What happens with the intuition?
Well, here's the thing. So intuition is a very bodily feeling, right? You feel it in your gut, your hair stands on end, there's the interoception. And so masculine, feminine, again, this is not male, female. Women tend to be more in their feminine, men tend to be more in their masculine. The brain, our logic, our reasoning these are very masculine qualities, right? And this is this means different things to different cultures, but yin yang, I'm very much into Eastern philosophy. So yin is the feminine, the yang is the masculine, right? If you think about it like this, the structure, logic, reasoning, the neocortex, all this is very much related with masculine qualities, whereas the feminine is more intuitive, more emotional, there's more EQ. And exactly. So this idea of just coming from the brain and thinking about things logically is a very masculine idea, whereas feminine is more about intuitive and empathy. And that's not just for women. Like, so for instance, I always was a very sensitive dude and still am today, right? And I've had to actually cultivate more masculine qualities. But, I've always had a very strong emotional quotient. Like my EQ was very high. I could always tell and feel what's happening with people emotionally. And I was always very empathic in that way and very in touch with my own feelings and emotions and also sensory acuity, ability to pick up that same process, like what I just described, happening in other people as well. So, so yeah. So anyway, it's not just women. I think it's just more of there's more masculine ways of thinking and being in the world and more feminine ways, and I don't think one is greater than the other. I think what works is obviously what needs to be heralded, and then it's really about the balance, being able to go into our logic and reasoning and not be like just lost in the land of emotion, and then also be able to be in touch with our emotion. And I actually, when I teach people, I have two different practices that develop the two different parts of the brain. So there's a practice for developing the neocortex, and then there's a practice for developing the more primitive part of the brain, the limbic system and the brainstem. And then when you can cultivate these two, it's like your brain becomes optimized, it becomes this powerhouse.
Yeah, yeah. It's about, I suppose, to know what's the best of both worlds and bring it into balance. Because if we act on the feminine energy of empathizing and then being talking to your friend forever of all the things that go wrong with her life, and then you cry with her, you're not helping her at all. You can let her cry for 2 minutes and then man up. Let's do
Right,
something. Is there something you can do about that? What have you learned? What
right,
is this mirroring to you? Yeah, what's this relationship telling you?
right.
Move on. And that would be the masculine approach. So I suppose that if we work together,
That
both,
and
yeah.
that's exactly it. Not to cut you off, but so sales for me is everything. Every single interaction, there's a sale, because either you're enrolling me into your reality, your thoughts, your ideas, or I'm enrolling you. And this happens, whether we're talking about $100,000 contracts, or whether we're talking about uh, whether or not to see Avengers or a romantic comedy, right? What movie we want to watch. And so what's really interesting about a sales conversation is that there's two components. There's the masculine, which is the container, where you say, okay, we're going to have an hour. We're going to have a conversation. If it feels right, I'm going to make an offer. Like, you're guiding somebody through the process. But if there's no connection, if there's no intimacy, it's like, I don't know you. I don't want to work with you. It's like, there's nothing here. And we always say that, a sale happens emotionally, on an emotional level. People make a decision to buy from an emotional place, and then they back it up with reasoning and logic, right? So you have to speak to the emotion. In fact, in my days as a filmmaker, the script, the acting, even the camera angles and everything was to elicit emotion in people, because that's what moves people, right? That to have some sort of experience, emotional experience is so important. And even with men who are like really macho, if I can get some dude to laugh, like, boom, I moved him emotionally, right? I don't have to get him to cry. I just need to get some guy to laugh. And it's like, I like you. I like you, right? So this balance of having the ability to move through life, to set goals and targets, and say to myself, okay, here's where I want to be. This is the type of person I want to show up as, and be intentional, and also be open to the play, the creativity, living in the moment, connecting with other people. These are both qualities that we need. And so you're absolutely right that it's really about developing both, and then having the wisdom, I would say, to know when to lean more into the masculine and when to lean into the feminine. It's a delicate balance, and it comes back to that conversational flow as well.
Mm-hmm. And bottom line, can it be learned?
100%.
That's the great news. We can learn it.
Well, that's
How?
the growth mindset.
And that's what you teach, is it?
The skill of being able to decipher and to go back and forth, and the mindset, of being adaptable, and according to neuroscience and neuroplasticity, we know that we can rewire our brains, right? We can create new neurons, new neural pathways and connections, and by doing so, create new habits, behaviors, and basically show up as anybody that we want to be. That our soul, right? Coming back to the original conversation, our soul's purpose, our soul's desire wants to be this incredible guitar player, but we've been sort of programmed and conditioned to be a lawyer. We can rewire our brain so that we can show up as that powerful guitar player who can also make a living somehow, and is not just a starving artist, right?
To be hustling there in the streets. Yeah, because cells that fire together wire together. What is
Neurons that fire together, wire
fire
together.
together, wire together? Exactly. And we can relearn and teach them to wire in a different way and then move through there. You know, a sentence that I heard that absolutely changed my life was, what if being you were safe? What do you think of this?
What that means to me is that a lot of people feel shame in their authentic and true expression, and it doesn't feel safe, I think, for a lot of people. You know, I'm a big fan of Brene Brown, as a lot of people are. So it's about vulnerability, but with boundaries. So it's
Yeah.
not like I'm just going up to random people on the street and exposing everything, where, because there's time and place for all of that. But I think you're absolutely right. What prevents most people from being authentic, and really the authenticity is where the power is at, right? If I come to you and I'm like gimmicking and acting as something that's not really true, then it falls flat, right? But if I come to you and I express myself in a way that's authentic, even when it doesn't feel comfortable, right?
Yeah.
It feels vulnerable and it feels uncomfortable and it feels unsafe. You know, it's like being an entrepreneur or being anybody who is on the path to self-expression and growth, personal development. You have to, and if you want to accelerate that path, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And so when you said, what if it's safe to be you? That's like the real life version of that, is getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Like, I'm used to being uncomfortable. If I can train myself, you know, as David Goggins talks about, embrace the suck, like the stuff that sucks in life, embrace it. It's a very stoic concept. And so if I can, you know, get into like, oh, actually, I feel safe when I'm unsafe. I think a lot of, like, you know, Navy SEALs and high performers, they're like drawn to those situations because it's they've just trained themselves to go into to run towards the fire, right? To run towards the lion's mouth. And that's the real safety, because it's not that the threat is going to go away. It's not that the fear is going to go away. That's what I'm trying to say. It's that we can develop courage such that before the mind kicks in and prevents us from really pursuing our true selves, where we've trained ourselves, our body, to already be in action, in motion, like already be on the phone call and having the conversation before I start thinking, what am I doing? I'm, you know, like, I'm on the call with this person, I'm bothering this person, or I'm asking this person out and she could say no and break my heart. It's like, I'm already in the act of doing that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely makes sense. Wow, so much wisdom condensed in so little time. When people want to connect with you, where do we send them to?
The best place would be my website, heislercoaching.com, HEISLER coaching.com. I have a new podcast that's launching this week. It's called Internal Leverage, and we're going to be talking all about these types of concepts and interviewing. I got celebrities on there, I got scientists on there, I got high performers on there, and we're talking all about what is the mindset, the habits, and the routines of achieving that state of high performance. So,
wow,
it's going to be amazing.
All in our hands. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.